Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Padjana Ranjana Yashodanandana Padjana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Rudikacharya Ashtotar Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Vishnupad Paramahansa Rudikacharya Ashtotar Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Shri Isopanisad Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 30th day of March, 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Sri Isopanisad, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we have reached mantra 15. Hiranmayena patrena Satyasyapi hitam mukham Tattvam pushan apavanu Satyadharmaya drishtaye Hiranmayena patrena Satyasyapi hitam mukham Tattvam pushan apavanu Satyadharmaya drishtaye Hiranmayena patrena Satyasyapi hitam mukham Tattvam pushan apavanu Satyadharmaya drishtaye Hiranmayena patrena Satyasyapi hitam mukham Tattvam pushan apavanu Satyadharmaya drishtaye Hiranmayena patrena Satyasyapi hitam mukham Tatvam Pushan Pavanu Satyadharmaya Drishtehe Hiranmahena Patrena Satyasyapi Hitam Mukham Tatvam Pushan Pavanu Satyadharmaya Drishtaye Hiranmahena Patrena Satyasyapi Hitam Mukham Tatvam Pushan Pavanu Satyadharmaya Drishtaye Hiranmahena, by a golden effulgence. Patrena, by a dazzling covering. Satyasya, of the supreme truth. Apihitam, covered. Mukham, the face. Tat, that covering. Tvam, yourself. Pushan, O sustainer. Apavanu, kindly remove. Satya, pure. Dharmaya, unto the devotee. Drishtaye, for exhibiting. Translation. O my Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita 14.27, the Lord explains his personal rays, Brahmajyoti, the dazzling effulgence of his personal form, in this way. I'll say, you say, Brahmano hi pratishtaham amitasya vyayasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukasya kantikasya cha. I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. Close quote. Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are three aspects of the same absolute truth. Brahman is the aspect most easily perceived by the beginner. Paramatma, the Supersoul, is realized by those who have further progressed. And Bhagavan realization is the ultimate realization of the absolute truth. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 7.7, where Lord Krishna says that he is the ultimate concept of the absolute truth. Mattak parataram nanyat. Therefore, Krishna is the source of the Brahma Jyoti as well as the all-pervading Paramatma. Later in the Bhagavad Gita 10.42, Krishna further explains. I'll see you see. Atava bahanaitena kim gate natavarjuna vishtibhyaham idham kritsnam ekanshena stito jagat. But what need is there, Arjuna, for all this detailed knowledge? With a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe. Close quote. Thus, by his one plenary expansion, the all-pervading Paramatma, the Lord maintains the complete material cosmic creation. He also maintains all manifestations in the spiritual world. Therefore, in this Shruti mantra of Sri Isopanisad, the Lord is addressed as Pushan, the ultimate maintainer. The personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is always filled with transcendental bliss, Anandamayo Bhyasat. When he was present at Vrindavan in India 5,000 years ago, he always remained in transcendental bliss, even from the beginning of his childhood pastimes. The killings of the various demons, such as Agha, Baka, Putana, and Pralamba, were but pleasure excursions for him. In his village of Vrindavan, he enjoyed himself with his mother, brother, and friends, and when he played the role of a naughty butter thief, all his associates enjoyed celestial bliss by his stealing. The Lord's fame as a butter thief is not reproachable, for by stealing butter, the Lord gave pleasure to his pure devotees. Everything the Lord did in Vrindavan was for the pleasure of his associates there. The Lord created these pastimes to attract the dry speculators and the acrobats of the so-called Hatha Yoga system, who wish to find the absolute truth. Of the childhood play between the Lord and his playmates, the cowherd boys, Shukadeva Goswami says in Srimad Bhagavatam 10, 12, 11. All right, several of you have the text. Ittam satam brahma sukhanubhutya dasyam ghatanam padadaivatena mayashitanam nadadarakena sakam vijahu kritapunya punja. One note on that sakam, that will be changed to sardham. That's their equivalent. There are different versions of the same thing, and Prabhupada would always say sardham, so in the reprinting we'll make it sardham. The personality of Godhead, who is perceived as the impersonal, blissful Brahman by the Jnanis, who is worshipped as the Supreme Lord by devotees in the mood of servitorship, and who is considered an ordinary human being by mundane people, played with the cowherd boys, who had attained their position after accumulating many pious activities. Thus the Lord is always engaged in transcendental loving activities with his spiritual associates in the various relationships of Shanta, neutrality, Dasya, servitorship, Sakya, friendship, Vatsalya, parental affection, and Madhurya, conjugal love. All right, one more paragraph. Since it is said that Lord Krishna never leaves Vrindavan Dham, one may ask how he manages the affairs of the creation. This is answered in the Bhagavad Gita 13, 14 to 18. The Lord pervades the entire material creation by his plenary part, known as the Paramatma, or Supersoul. Although the Lord personally has nothing to do with material creation, maintenance, and destruction, he causes all these things to be done by his plenary expansion, the Paramatma. Every living entity is known as Atma, or Soul, and the principal Atma who controls them all is the Paramatma, the Supersoul. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So with this verse, the Isopanisad distinctly shifts gears. If you read through the mantras up to this point, there's a lot of warning about, the cultivating ignorance leads to darkness and suffering. Cultivating knowledge is just the opposite. Worshipping Sambhutam, that word comes up again and again, which really means the absolute truth. Those who worship the demigods go to the darkest regions of ignorance. Worse so, those who worship the so-called Sambhutam, the so-called absolute, meaning the impersonalists, or so-called worshippers of the Lord who are actually not following the proper means. So there's been a lot of that, and now suddenly the devotee who's wrote this or is uttering it comes onto the stage, if you will, and he's praying to the Lord to remove this effulgence, hiranmayena patrena, golden effulgence, which is covering his face. In other words, the Brahma Jyoti obscures the personal quality of the Lord that this devotee wants to see. And he specifically says, mukam, the face. Please reveal yourself to your devotee. That's what he's asking here. And we have several prayers. We have only 3 more mantras here. And prayers are going to continue. And this is why this is famous as the Isopanisad. There are 108 best-known Upanishads. Of those, there are 8 which are most famous. And Isopanisad is always listed as number 1 as the leading Upanishad. So, Srila Prabhupada, he gives us insight here into the different manifestations of the Absolute Truth. This comes up, if you're familiar, in the 2nd chapter, 1st canto, where we're enjoined to understand the Absolute Truth. And what is that? And it says, those who know the Absolute Truth, Padanti Tattvavidas, the Tattvavidas, those who know the actual truth, they say that it's understood in 3 stages, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And in that purport, Srila Prabhupada says, these different phases of the Absolute Truth are understood by transcendentalists according to the means of approach. And he gives this wonderful example, which he gives several places. First of all, there's the sun. You have the sun rays, right? So even now, we can see the sun is up. We don't have to check, is the sun up in the sky, because we see through these panes, and the sun is up. So that's the preliminary understanding, that all-pervading effulgence of the sun. And you may not even know where the sun is in the sky, but you can perceive that effulgence. Then there's the localized aspect, which is the sun in a certain part of the sky. That corresponds to the Paramatma, the soul, which is localized within every heart and within every atom. And then if you actually are able to go to the sun planet, you'll meet that there's a whole world there. And there's a presiding deity called Surya, who's the sun god, and so forth. And that's corresponding to Bhagavan. So the big mistake, or say fallacy, in the impersonalist argument, especially the Mayavadis, is that the Brahman is original, and the Bhagavan is a manifestation of Brahman. And when you go past, that's why you have this statement in the purport or commentary on 934 by a famous commentator, that one has to not surrender or focus on Krishna himself, but the unborn, eternal, avyakta, indivisible Brahmajyoti within Krishna. And Prabhupada, whenever he got a chance, several times in the Bhagavad Gita, we're reading now the 11th chapter, and sometimes he will mention that. Several places in the Bhagavad Gita he refers to it, not by name, but to that idea, which is very offensive to Krishna, because it's saying that all of his personality and his senses and all of that, that's just really illusory. When you get past that, then you get to the reality, which is the Brahman. And how did we come about? Because we're also Brahman. Well, we chipped off that Brahman, and that's the living entity. Due to ignorance, that's how we feel that we're separate, and that we're separate individuals. When we become enlightened, then we'll merge back into Brahman and become one, but then we become the absolute, our natural state. So that is the Mayavad idea. Ultimately, it's not satisfying to the soul. That's a proof that in one sense, that's a proof that it's fallacious. Because the final goal of whatever process you're following should bring you to the point of eternal happiness and satisfaction. There's nothing else. You're completely satisfied. You don't care about anything else. But that's never the case with the Mayavadis. I've never really encountered that many dyed-in-the-wool Mayavadis. There's plenty of impersonalists going around. But those who are strict Mayavadis who follow Shankaracharya and all that. But I remember walking down the street in Vrindavan. I think it was Bhaktivedanta Marg, that main road that's renamed, that goes to Raman Reddy. And I immediately noticed them. There was, I think, 3 or 4 of them walking together, a little staggered. They had that tilak, the sideways tilak. And they were kind of checking things out, walking down. And they just didn't have the simple joy of the panwala or the simple devotees in Vrindavan who were just Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe, and they like to chant Hare Krishna. They weren't devotees. They just wanted to try to absorb some of the nectar because it's such an important place of pilgrimage. And they were looking this way and that way. They had indeed, in addition to the tilak, they had frowns on their face, like this. In other words, they couldn't really accept it because to them, everything they see is part of the illusion. You see the problem. So, and traditionally, Prabhupada would always quote this verse, Ye and ye rabindakse vimukta maninas tvayasta bhava rabhashutta buddhaya. This is a prayer by the demigods for Krishna in the womb. And they're glorifying Krishna, glorifying his devotees, and then they say, besides the devotees, O lotus-eyed Lord, there are others, anye, ye anye arabindaksha, who are vimukta maninas. They think that they're liberated, that in their own minds they're liberated. Because a certain few of them, by severe austerities, can suppress the senses, suppress the desire for sense gratification, and rise up to the parampadam. Krichena yenye vimuktamaninas try ashtabhavad avishudha buddhaya. They are averse to serving you because they have they're impure consciousness, impure intelligence. Aruha krichena parampadam. Parampadam is kind of Brahma-Bhuta platform. That's the transcendental plane beyond all the dualities here. So a few can rise up to that. But ultimately, they get bored. They're not satisfied there. They're not fully satisfied for eternity, however long it takes. And patantyado, they fall down again. Because patantyado anadrita yushmarangriya. Anadrita yushmarangriya, because they don't want to worship your lotus feet. So, and Krishna confirms, brahmano hi pratishtaham. If you're really interested in a dramatic conversation in relation to this, years ago, there was a very nice offering written, homage to Prabhupada, written for the Vyas Puja book by Shivaram Swami. And he recounted an experience he had. He was still in England at that point. He was the GBC, and he was staying most of the time there and preaching. And there was a gathering of, it wasn't put on by us, I don't think. No, it wasn't put on by us, but it was a gathering of Vedic scholars and this and that, And there was a stage, and he was going to speak at a certain point, but there were several others before him. So while some yogi about something was speaking, and it was the big crowd, and he was struck up a conversation with the person next to him, and he realized, this guy is an out-and-out Mayavadi. And so while that speech was going on, they're having this big argument going right in the back there. And he recounts that what he was quoting Aruha Kuchena and other things. And it's a very nice description of an actual encounter of a devotee trained by Srila Prabhupada and very learned, and how he defeated this Mayavadi. I'll find it for you if you're interested. So this is very dramatic here. The devotee realizes that beyond this effulgence is what I'm looking for, And this brilliant Brahman is not my final goal. And so he asked the Lord to please remove that, so that he will reveal his beautiful, all-attractive face. So this is why the Isopanisad is so important, because it brings you from philosophy and heavy preaching about the Lord to this evocation of deep prayer of the devotee. So, probably some other quotes. These are all good, for defeating the Mayavadis. Mattak paratanang nanyat. That one line, Krishna is saying there, there's nothing beyond me. Mattak paratanang nanyat. There's nothing that's superior to me, such as the Brahman. In other words, that's a big mistake. Therefore, Krishna is the source of the Brahma Jyoti. The key verses we find in the Bhagavatam, the 4 Chatushloki, and the key verses in the Bhagavad Gita, 10:8-11. Both of those start out with Krishna declaring himself to be the cause of all causes, right? In the Bhagavatam, he says, "Aham evasame vagre nanyayat sadasat param." In the beginning, there wasn't anything manifest in the material sphere, but I existed. Nanyayat sadasat param. There was no sat or sat or sat. After the manifestation takes place, it is only I who also exist, because it's all my energy and my expansions. And when it's all wound up, I will continue to exist. And this is the definition of the Absolute Truth by the Vedanta Sutra. Janmadyasya yataha. That which is the source of all manifestations, and which is not destroyed at the time of annihilation. Then there must be the cause of all causes, you see. So, and in the Bhagavad Gita, text 10:8, aham sarvasya prabhavo mattak sarvam pravartate. In those 2 lines, he's saying the same thing. That I've generated everything emanates from me. So who is that I? That I is Krishna. That's Goloka Vrindavan Krishna. Because the idea is that, Prabhupada once said, and it always stuck with me, we can find out a lot about God by contemplating ourselves. What would we do if we were God? You had all the powers, what would you do? Now, in our conditioned state, the modes of passion, I would be, everyone would serve me, and I would be enjoying this, enjoying that. But that's not really the source of the pleasure, of ultimate pleasure. The pleasure comes from the reciprocation of loving exchange. You see? And that's why Krishna, in his ultimate manifestation, he hides all the power and majesty, so that his intimate devotees, his friends, his parents, the gopis, the cows, and everything else in Goloka Vrindavan, can not be afraid of him and awestruck. He doesn't want that. He wants them to love him and he can exchange them. Now, is it here that I was just reading, just like in the rasa dance and other, Krishna's whole purpose there is to give pleasure to his devotees by engaging them in his service. He knows that that's the greatest pleasure. There's a wonderful passage in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the Adi Leela. I've been rereading the CC. How everyone is scrambling to find a position of service to the Lord, which includes Balaram, Nityananda. He just wants to be known as the servant of Lord Chaitanya. Advaita Acharya, who has to has to break down the natural social etiquette where he's much of a senior to Lord Chaitanya, who's worshiping him, bowing down. He doesn't want that. He wants to be in a position of servant. So he preaches Mayavad for a while. Lord Chaitanya comes and beats him, which is what he wanted. So now he's in ecstasy. In other words, that's why Lord Krishna comes as Lord Chaitanya, right? So we can experience the pleasure of being the highest servant of himself. The mellows that Radharani is feeling, he's saying, she's enjoying more than me. I'm God, and she's enjoying more than me, so I have to take that role. So so Krishna, he wants to give that pleasure to his devotees, so he hides all of this majesty, and he just reveals the greatest sweetness and delight and the things that make him so lovable. And that's what's going on in the spiritual world. And that's what our final goal is. But in order to do that, we have to break down our long-standing false ego and the false sense of being proprietor and controller. And therefore we need to understand the actual constitutional position of Krishna as God. It's the source of all energies, and that we're simply his servants. From that position we can enter into bhakti and ultimately come to a more intimate relationship. So, Prabhupada quotes from Bhagavad Gita 10:42, Atavabha Hiraitim. What is the need for all this detailed knowledge? I think we just finished this chapter in the evening class. Krishna goes through this and that of aquatics. I'm the shark. Of warriors. I'm you, Arjun. And again, he says, but ultimately, everything you see, whatever it is that has some majesty, strength, awe-inspiring quality, that's just a little spark of my splendor. So what's beyond that? So we should try to get. So then he gets into chapter 11, but really what's beyond chapter 11 is the all-attractive two-hand form of Krishna. That comes at the end. Let's see. So now, this principle that Krishna is always filled with transcendental bliss, and then the idea that we're part and parcel of Krishna, so our natural state is to be always happy. But clearly when we compare that to our conditioned state, it's worlds apart. How do we get from this state to that state where we can also experience that unending happiness? Well, that's the science of bhakti. It means purification. In one word, it's purification. Purification of the mind, purification of the senses, intelligence, of everything. Purification from what? From the effects of acting under the modes of nature. All the karmic reactions, all of the lust, anger, greed, and all those different things that are now anarthas or impure things in our heart. That is powerfully cleansed away by the process of bhakti, beginning with hearing and chanting. Chinbadam Sukata Krishna. So when he was present in Vrindavan, he always remained in transcendental bliss, even from the beginning of his childhood pastimes. All of these killing of the various demons were but pleasure excursions for him. Of course, it's also mentioned that it's actually his Vasudeva expansion that killed the demons. Krishna is in the purest sense, or in the most original sense, is simply engaged in pleasure pastimes with the friends and the cows and the gopis, his parents, like that. So he's a butter thief, but it's not reproachable. So the pastime is so wonderful where the elder gopis complain to Mother Yashoda. They just want an excuse to go over there so they can see Krishna. But they complain. I'm sorry, there's 3 beautiful verses which I once memorized, but I don't want to mangle them now. But I put this in a poem. Let's see if I can remember the poem. So you have to visualize the painting, which is like one of my all-time favorites. I'm sure you know it, of Krishna sitting he's got the hand in the butter. He's looking right at you. There's these beautiful curtains. There's some spilled butter, So that's he's looking at. And who's he looking at? The gopis, the elder gopis. He's looking at them completely innocent. I didn't do anything, you know. So he says, Yashoda's friends approached her and complained about her naughty son, the butter thief. Oh friend, this child of yours must be restrained. He simply torments us with no relief. We trust that you will thoroughly chastise this naughty boy who steals and eats our food. But then he looked at them with love-filled eyes, awakening their sweet maternal mood. And so Yashoda and her friends were drowned in waves and whirlpools of maternal love. Through all three worlds, no greater love is found. Its home is in Goloka, far above. Right? It's one of the sweetest pastimes, these complaints. And so there's another one. This is a verse I didn't put into a poem, but I'll explain it. In Rupa Goswami's Lila Chanda. I should really put that into the database. You know, the database has certain treasures that many devotees don't realize. I put the Pajabali in there. Pajabali is just Rupa Goswami's favorite verses. Every verse is special. But this one is within this Lila Chanda, which is a summary of Vrindavan Lila in most exquisite Sanskrit. And between the pastimes, there's like a verse that encapsulates the mood of the pastime. So this is exactly this pastime of stealing butter. So it's Griham Sakikaradike Pravachatis Mani Lakshishur Dudi Kudukavatakam Dadihadam Dadam Yudhuram Iti Pakatamidate Mukadaya Mahashankatam Bilokitunakamkati Katatamahari Patavak. So the last few words of that verse say, may these pastimes of Hari always protect you, may they always protect the universe. It's an interesting concept. So what it is a little speaking of Mukara. I forget, I'm sorry, I may not have exactly. I think Mukara is Radharani's grandmother, and Karalika is Krishna's grandmother. Some of the old ladies are in the house. And Griham Sakikara, oh friend, Karalika, lock the doors. That bold blue butter thief has entered the house, and I'm going to catch him now and punish him. So Krishna heard them, and he went into a corner and he hid, and making the darkness into a shield to protect him. May these pastimes of Krishna always protect you. So this is the meditation of the greatest scholars and greatest devotees, is crafting verses so we can remember these beautiful pastimes. So and then Prabhupada, this is one of Prabhupada's favorite verses here, Itam Satam Brahma Sukhana Bhutya, which describes the great fortune of the cowherd boys. And the end says, Krita Punya Punja. And Prabhupada would say they've accumulated heaps of punya. Now punya normally or often means pious credit that you get that eventually takes you to heaven so you can enjoy, piety. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur said there's other kinds of punya. Bhaktyun Mukhi Sukriti. Sukriti is what you do in order to get punya, which is pious credit. Bhaktyun Mukhi Sukriti gives you punya that brings you closer to Krishna. In other words, the result is bhakti, not anything material. So that's the kind of punya that they had accumulated, these cowherd boys. So he's describing this different, it's pertinent here because he's talking about Brahma, Sukhana Bhutya, that those who are impersonalists, they take the absolute truth to be Brahman, and are looking to enjoy happiness in that way. Those who are devotees in Dasya Ras, they understand the same Krishna to be the supreme God, majesty, and his servants. And those who are complete in Maya, they just take him to be an ordinary child, not a Dadakena, a human being. But that same personality is being intimately played with by these boys who have accumulated sufficient bhakti credits, so to speak. So that illustrates, it's the same personality, but they're seeing him in different ways. Like people come into the temple, and some may have the thought, although they wouldn't say it probably, that no, that's a statue, they're worshiping a statue there, that's idol worship. But so that's what they see, where we're seeing Krishna's there, we dress him nicely and offer food, that's Krishna, And the pure devotees are getting close and they're, talking to Krishna, They're actually, because of the purity, they're actually able to have the full manifestation of Krishna even through the deity. Same thing with the holy name. We're chanting the holy name, but we're not experiencing it the same way as pure devotees experience it, as Krishna himself and all the attraction and the beauty that can be there when we purify. So that's, let's see, yeah. So then this idea that he never leaves Vrindavan. I said, wait a minute, we just read in the Krishna book. He left Vrindavan, he went to Mathura, So the idea is that he has different forms, even as Krishna. And when he leaves Vrindavan, supposedly, he's still there in the bhava expansion, and the devotees are experiencing in separation. And so even today, one can go and experience Krishna's presence even more in his abode there, because he never leaves. So that's there's a verse about that. And this Prabhupada answers it by saying, how does he manage the affairs of the creation? Well, this is part of the tattva that we understand, Sambandha Gyan, that through his energies, he's creating all these energies, and through his expansion as the super soul, he's managing it, providing the intelligence, overseeing everything. And that's how that creation is going on. And some devotees, I think they were asking last night, or I've heard it before, well, does that mean that, Krishna created this coronavirus? What does that have to do, That's how the material energy works, The material energy, the material world is not for our pleasure. It's for our reformation. That's what it's for. And so there's always a result to us trying to imitate Krishna and enjoying here, which is what Maya is all about. And that result is birth, death, old age. Disease is in there, as one of the things. And yes, it's created by Krishna, but it's, all these deaths are going to happen. Nobody dies. Nobody dies. That's the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita. Najayate mrite, and nobody is born. So what are we to learn from this? First of all, that because people are so sinful, the whole world is dominated by demons. There's going to be all of this upheaval, and there's going to be pandemics and wars. Somehow we've avoided that since World War II. But that's another surprise that can happen at any time. So as devotees, we try to alert people to the reality and get them to chant Hare Krishna, read the books, and become devotees, so that they'll have a better next birth. And ourselves, we should be very eager to not return. We don't want to come back. Do we really want to come back to a world like this? Which is crumbling in our, you look, everywhere you look, the earth is becoming practically uninhabitable, due to the action of the demons. So this is just a reminder how tenuous is our situation in the material world. There's no security here. Last night we were talking about this beautiful verse, Samashitaye palapallavaplavam mahatpadam punyasho marare pavam buddhi vatsapadam param padam yad vipadam natesham. You have to be deaf not to hear the poetry in that verse. So those who take full shelter, samashrita, you always look for the prefixes, they're often important. Ashrita is one thing, but samashrita means complete shelter. Of what? Of the boat of the lotus feet of Krishna. Padapallavaplavam. Where the whole universe rests, and where all the Mahatmas stay, in his lotus feet. Murari. Which simply glorification of whom brings punya. We're back to that same word, punya. Not material punya, but bhakti punya. Punya yasho murari. Then what happens for them? Then now you get in the boat and suddenly you don't need the boat anymore. Because the whole ocean just shrank down to the water in a calf's hoofprint. You can walk over it. That's an interesting turn of phrase. Vatsapadam. Because you get to the parampadam, the actual supreme abode, which is Krishna Loka. And not for those who are there, even though you physically may be here, your consciousness can be there, and you're really there. Not for them is this world where there's danger at every step. So it's a very dramatic verse, and it's certainly worth meditating on in these times. Okay, I'm going to read this translation again, and if you have any questions. We didn't ask our guests if there are any, to send any text questions, but we'll do that next time. Okay, O my Lord, says the devotee speaking the Isopanisad, O my Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by a dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee. Something?
When you said there are 108 Upanishads, and you said there are 8 like especially important ones, and you said Isopanishads generally listed as the first, are you saying in terms of like even people who study all the Upanishads, they see Isopanishad as one of the topmost, or just chronologically in some sense?
I'm just referring to purport where all those Upanishads are listed.
Yeah. So by the Vaishnavas it's listed, not necessarily by non-Vaishnavas.
I couldn't say that.
Okay.
You may be right about that. And frankly, I'm not sure it's 8. I think there may be more than that, but there's no more than 12 that are the top. Mm-hmm. We hear from all the time, Mundaka Upanishad, Shvetashvara Upanishad, those are all in the list, But Isha Upanishad is definitely number 1.
Okay. And could you say more about, you said the punya referred to in the verse which you were talking about, you said it's not standard punya, which is kind of like a good karma, but it's a kind of good result which also brings you closer to Krishna. Does that mean this kind of punya that's being referred to is like a kind of like, is good in terms of like materially speaking and it brings you closer to Krishna? Or just, it could be horrible materially speaking, but it brings you closer to Krishna, therefore it's called punya?
The thing is, there's this phrase that sticks in my mind, Bhaktyun Mukhi Sukriti. Sukriti is action, pious action, which results in awakening your bhakti. So the punya, because normally what you get from Sukriti is punya. You get pious credits. When they build up, then you can, punch your ticket to go to heaven. But we're certainly not interested in that. So the activities that we're doing are pious. But punya, my understanding is that punya is the result of Sukriti. In other words, it's kind of, so that can be material or spiritual. And certainly in the case of the cowherd boys, it's spiritual. In other words, they're great devotees who graduated to the position of playing intimately with Krishna. So, what was the other part of the question?
If it's good punya, if it's like good punya spiritually, does that mean necessarily it's also good punya materially?
No, not at all.
So it could be bad materially, but that's good spiritual punya.
Just like the famous verse where Krishna says, "Yasaham nagunnami harishe taddanang shanai." When I really show my mercy to someone, I take away all his material assets. And it goes on. And then what happens? Because most people are householders, and their wife and children don't like him anymore and kick him out of the house. In other words, it's like Job, He's bereft of everything. Suddenly everything is taken away. So what are you going to do? Jump out of the window? Or are you going to, pray to Krishna and become more sincere? And of course, it's not just, please give me, something material. But it's realizing the blessing of being bereft of those things. An example is Parikshit, who was cursed. Now, that's a little unusual because he was so powerful as a devotee, he could have counteracted the curse of Shringi. But he took it as Krishna's blessing, and that he had a role to play to manifest the Bhagavatam for the good of, the people in general. And so he accepted the curse and he gave everything up instantaneously. So that, all of his bhakti kind of culminated in that experience. So what is that? Now this is sometimes confusing to people. This is because the standard reaction of religious people, Prabhupada gives the example of the ladies in Germany during the war. So they all had, especially who they're married to their husband, their parents, their father, their sons, they all get called into the army. So they're praying like anything, they're Lutherans mostly, but going to church, praying that they come back, and oftentimes they didn't come back. Or if they came back, they were grievously wounded, whatever, So many of them became atheists. Prabhupada gave this example, probably told by his godbrother, the German godbrother. So this is not pure bhakti. We have to be governed by that verse, Brahma's verse, Tattenu kampam susamikshimano bundana evatmakutam vipakam. That the real devotees, they're always looking at whatever happens to them as Krishna's mercy, good or bad. And if it's materially bad, he said, this is a result of something I've done in my past life, or in this life, and Krishna is minimizing it. Could have been much worse. And then when good things happen, you say, oh, Krishna's so kind, he's giving me more facility to serve him. So in both cases, you have a favorable attitude toward God. You don't lose your faith, you know. And this is the common thing because of the religion that doesn't have the science behind it, where you can actually understand our own position and what the world is and what Krishna is. You take God to be your order supplier. You know, that famous verse. You go to pray for something material, you know. Now you have these whole massive churches dedicated to prosperity theology or something, you know. It's a complete corruption of religion. And so the result of our bhakti may be materially negative. Prabhupada gave himself as an example for that verse. Yasyaham. He was building up his business. He could have been successful. It was predicted he would be as wealthy as Birla. He said, okay, he's a devotee, so I'll use all that money for Krishna, you know. And Krishna had other plans. Business failed, everything failed. And finally Prabhupada, you know, at first he was kind of aghast. Oh, no, I have to take sannyasis. Guru came to him in a dream several times, you know. And so he did that, and he came out totally successful. So it's a different species of punya. Anyone else?
This is kind of a side point, but is there some type of explanation of or some, anyways, where you could find the history of Srila Prabhupada's books? Because I think that's important. For example, when Srila Prabhupada translated and wrote Sri Isopanisad and the Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhagavad Gita, so many books, and they all have a history behind them.
Yeah.
And I've never seen anything like, okay, this is the history of how it all came about, or heard someone describe each book, which I think would be nice, because you can learn a lot from, you know, the Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita manuscript being stolen, or Upanishad was written this time, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, each book has a story, what year it came out, you know, Krishna book, Nectar of Devotion.
There isn't for each book like that. There's you find it some of that in the Lilamrita, but it's probably something we should compile. You know, I mean, along with all the other stuff we're doing. But each book is unique, actually. You know, I mean, how did Prabhupada write the Krishna book? Why did he write the Krishna book? You know, it's 1969 or 70, or the early 70. And he saw that, okay, they're chanting Hare Krishna, and I've given them the first canto, and now we have TLC and maybe Isopanisad. But they don't really know who this Krishna is. You know, the Leela, you know, the full personality of Krishna. And so he stopped everything, which was the Bhagavatam, the full Bhagavatam, and he dictated what he called summary study, rather than the formal, you know, which would have taken a much longer time to do the 10th canto. And so he stopped it and he gave the Krishna book. And that, you know, how did it, then how was the production going on? You know, he would dictate in the tapes, he'd send the tapes to Boston, and Jayawada Das Brahmaji, or maybe Bhakta J, you know, that was his first engagement, you know, was transcribing the Krishna book. So it all, you know, came together, and then that story, you've seen that 1970 Rath Yatra following Srila Prabhupada. It's during the Rath Yatra, Brahmananda wanted to present the books to Prabhupada, so he went to Japan and said, "You got to have them by this day." He said, "It's impossible. So you have to do it, otherwise our relationship with you," you know, they were buying a lot of books. So you remember the story? So he's at the airport, ready to get on a plane and go to San Francisco from Japan. I think he was, or maybe, I think he was in Japan. Anyway, so they drive up. You know, in those days, they didn't have the stairs to go up. They still do it sometimes. And they drive up in this big limousine. They've got a box of the Krishna books. I think it was just volume 1. And you've seen those big, you know, oversized things with the silver on it. And so he opens them. I go, wow, right in the seat. And a beautiful production, you know, and the paintings. It was the first book with the full color paintings like that. And so, and then the guy next to him, "What is that?" So, "This is our book from our spiritual master." He said, "How much are they?" So he sold them right there to the guy next to him. $10, which was a lot in 1970. So, that would go into the story of the Krishna book, the production, yeah. But you probably just sit down with me and ask me about it, because I've got a lot of, how did the Isho come about? It started he was serializing it in 1960 in his BTG. And he did that for, I think, but didn't finish it. It was 10 or 11 of the mantras. And he brought with him, which I didn't know existed, but was in the archives, a manuscript, which I then used when I revised it in 1992. But you had 3 different versions. You had the original printing in English, edited by Ray Rama, the revision in 74, re-edited by Hayagriva, and then 92, my revision of that. So each book has a history. There's something called the Edit Audit Trail, which has all the different versions. I don't know if it has the kind of biographical, statements, but at least the way the books evolved to the present state that we have them. That's there. But you want more than that, the story behind each book. That's for another time. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.